An enormous great white shark grabs a semi-retired surfer in her jaws, and he's ripped from his surfboard. But his friends are close by, and they race to his rescue. Bravely, they fight off the shark and grab their gravely injured friend. But as they paddle to shore, the shark follows them, and in a heart-stopping moment, circles them relentlessly. Will they make it to dry land before she strikes again? Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. Rob Pedretti was 60 years old and a devoted surfer. He was part of the surfing community, regularly joining his friends out on the waters of Australia's Gold Coast. It wasn't just the lure of the waves that drew him to the water. It was also the marine wildlife and his respect for nature. Surfing in Australian waters always meant that sharks are never far away, but rarely do they cause harm. But for the unlucky few, these marine predators strike, causing devastating consequences. It's something that surfers try not to think about as they bob up and down on their boards, waiting for their next wave. Originally from Geelong in Victoria, Rob had lived in Two Gun, Queensland for 20 years. He was semi-retired, having worked successfully as a tiler, and now he hit the surf nearly every day with his friends. He was living his best life. In June 2020, he entered the water with his mates Frank Schlee and Mark Hayes at the coastal town of Kingscliff, just south of Tweed Heads in New South Wales. They paddled out to just beyond the surf, ducking under the crashing waves until they came to the calm water, where they sat on their boards waiting for the perfect wave. It was how they enjoyed spending their time. They laughed and joked while out on the water, but as they bobbed about on their surfboards, a great white shark swam undetected below them. She was a 3.5-meter, 11-foot opportunistic predator. The water was clear and the surf relatively gentle. The surfers on the surface of the sea were silhouetted against the bright sun above them. It was about 10 a.m. when, without warning, the great white shark propelled itself upward toward the group of surfers. It locked its eyes on one silhouette in particular. It was Rob. Unaware of the imminent danger he was in, Rob continued to sit on a surfboard, looking over his shoulder at the rising waves. All of a sudden, he was knocked on his side. He glanced down and stared right into the jaws of an enormous shark. Before he could react, it bit down on the back of his left thigh. Rob let out a yell and clung onto his board. He gripped it, refusing to be taken beneath the waves. But the shark was too powerful. With one tug, Rob was yanked off his board and into the water. He grappled with the shark. He gasped for air every time he broke the surface. He continued relentlessly to hit the animal, trying to free his leg from its jaws. His friends Frank and Mark saw the commotion. Terror filled them. They could see the huge head of the animal. They could see its body arching up and out of the sea as it drove Rob down each time. Its tail thrashed wildly, and the terrifying dorsal fin protruded through the surface. Below it was the large dark shadow of its body, an impressive and alarming giant below the waves. Instead of making a swim for it and saving themselves, Frank and Mark rushed to help their friend. There was no way they were leaving him there while he struggled just feet from where they paddled. The shark was still holding on to Rob's leg. His fight was fading. Blood poured from his leg. When Frank and Mark joined the fight, the shark let go. Rob was finally free from its grip, and Frank pulled him onto his board. But the shark hadn't finished yet. Undeterred by the other surfers stepping in, it continued to follow them as they paddled toward the shore. It was a truly horrific situation to be in. Frank and Mark had put their lives on the line to save their friend. Not only had they attacked the shark, its rough sandpapery skin scraping them as they rained their fists down on it, but the blood that poured from Rob's open wound was a dangerous thing to be surrounded by. A cloud of dark dread followed them, trailing behind them as they inched their way closer to shore. Then they spotted the shark's dorsal fin again. This time it was in front of them. They could see the shadow of its body just below the surface. Its eyes were fixed on the trio. Any moment now, they thought that it might strike again. Any moment it could take one of them, but the two friends paddled onwards, pushing their gravely injured friend closer to dry land. The shark's dorsal fin was now beside them. They now realized that the shark was circling them. She was investigating them. waiting for the opportune moment to strike again, or perhaps waiting for Rob to succumb. But his friends wouldn't leave him now. Mercifully, they made it to the shallows. They leapt off their boards and carried Rob onto the sand, but he was limp and unresponsive. His leg was torn open at the upper thigh. His artery had been severed and he was losing consciousness. Emergency services had been called and arrived at the beach. Paramedic Terry Savage from NSW Ambulance was the first on the scene. He described Rob's injuries as significant and the whole scene as very confronting. It was something that nobody can prepare for. They tried their best to save Rob, but although his friends had retrieved him from the water alive, he died on the sand before making it to the ambulance just 40 minutes after the attack. It was a devastating and tragic incident that shook the surfing community. Rob was such a well-liked man, and nobody ever had a bad word to say about him. He was described by his family as humble, fun-loving, down-to-earth, and an all-around legend. There was an order by police to kill the shark. Typically, sharks are protected, but the way this one was behaving was cause for concern. Not only had it relentlessly attacked Rob, but it hadn't backed away when the other two arrived to help. It had pursued all three of them, continuing to circle them until they made it to the shallows. An order to kill a shark is given if it's seen as a threat to further life. It seemed that this one fit the bill. Helicopters, jet skis, and drones were scrambled to search for the shark. It was found still lurking in the area more than 3 hours after the attack. She had smelled blood, and she wanted more. As she was tailed by the motorboats, she then swam into deeper water and away from the area. Further along the coast, jet skis patrolled the water, warning swimmers and surfers to get out. Signs were erected, and beaches from Kingscliff, 6 miles south to Cabarita, were closed for 24 hours. This was extended when the shark was spotted the following day. Sadly, Rob was the third person to be killed by a shark in Australia that year. There was no way that Rob would want the shark to be culled. He and his friends didn't just love surfing, they also loved the marine life out there. He was against installing shark nets due to the danger they posed to marine life. He, like his friends, knew the risks of entering the shark's domain. Living in Australia, they heard about the tragedies of shark attacks that befell surfers and swimmers every year, but they loved the sport and the enjoyment it gave them. Although Rob was gone, his family and friends had to live with the shocking way in which he died. His friend Frank, who had selflessly and bravely come to his aid, was so traumatized by the incident that he received counseling to deal with it. A tear-jerking vigil and memorial service was held for Rob on the beach and his favorite surf spot. His friends and the wider surfing community also performed a paddle out to remember the surfer.